Okay, well, welcome to this session. It's a very, very interesting and a little bit of a different session than what we typically have here, because we are not only having a conversation amongst the five of us here, but it's also a report back from many discussions that have happened here over the course of the last year in the various governors sessions, because everybody is here as an expert in their own field, because that's what gets you into the discussion there, but also everybody is here as a representative of the respective group. What I want to do is, going to get this started with you all giving us a view on what is happening in your particular industry here. And I have on the left here Frank Appel, CEO of Deutsche Post and DHL, and he is the chair of the Governors Meeting of Logistics and Transport. Then Samir Brikho, CEO Amec of UK, chair of the Governors Meeting of Engineering and Construction. Gérard Mestrallet, CEO and chairman of GDF SUEZ, and he's the new chair of the Energy Group. And Feike Sijbesma, CEO of Royal DSM Netherlands, and he chairs the Chemicals Group. So why don't we have starting with you?
Yeah, may Klaus, that I summarize briefly what we have discussed. So first of all, in all these circumstances, the first thing we discussed is, what is the outlook and how is trading going? And, being an early indicator without knowing that until the volumes are in our books, and the sense in our group was, the worst is over and definitely trading is picking up again and starting in Asia. But, it's not booming yet, but, I think, we all felt the worst is over and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Then we talked about, are the fundamental trends of globalization still intact? And we all think, yes, they are. And we will see a faster recovery in Asia than in other parts of the world, and that is already taking place. And that will lead and support further the globalization. We had also discussion around what are our challenges as logistics and transportations, and there are significant challenges, starting with how can we enable more trade? We developed, together with WEF, we developed a book where you can really assess, how countries are enabling trade. We developed an index which is very interesting to read, I think, because you can see that there's a close correlation between enabling trade and growth. And we will use that as an organization, or, as several organizations, to talk to countries, what they can do to facilitate trade instead of hindering trade. So that is an important theme we worked on. We also worked on the green challenge and our global warming. We have agreed now on standards, how we measure that, so that if we go to customers, we not only sit there and say, we have lower carbon emission than our competitors because we measure it as such. No, we have now agreed, on certain products already how we measure that, and we agreed as well that we want to get it certified from our auditors, so that you really, as customers or public opinion, can compare, how companies are doing. So these were two prominent themes. And the third was that we really talked about, what can we do with regard to corruption. Trading is something where you have to do with facilitating payments and how we want to deal with that. And we made good progress in agreeing, should we not go in a country and piloting this, something like that. So that's too early to say because we are still in working in progress. But overall, these are more or less the themes we discussed. So we are convinced that global trading will continue and globalization will take place. And we talked major hindrance or difficult challenges on carbon and enabling trade. And that was more or less what we did.
Very good. Samir, your industry, engineering construction, is also a leading indicator, and everybody's kind of looking at it. So where did you come out, Samir?
We started actually from discussing about what had happened in Copenhagen and what is the impact of Copenhagen on us. And for us in the E&C community, we were actually not surprised that we did not come to a tangible conclusion, which many people maybe were looking for. But in a way, we were not, maybe we were disappointed, but we were not surprised. But what's a more important issue for us is that how are we able to move forward? Looking on the challenges which we have in front or ahead of us, in the past we used to deal with relatively conventional technologies. And what is interesting now we see is that there is no silver bullet solution for all these problems which we have. And as we see, there is a number of mix which is going to be, let's say, involved in order to be able, let's say, to deal with the challenges. There is now a lot of renewables, there is a lot of ideas, there is a lot of startups, and suddenly we feel that does the engineering capacity which we have today, do they have the right qualification and quantification to be able to deal with these issues? Now, who would thought that, for instance, we'll be having thousands of engineers to work in solar panels and solar implementation? Who thought that at a certain moment of time that maybe 20,000 engineers in the nuclear, let's say, capability available, let's say, in some of the countries is not actually enough in order to build more than 2 or 3 power plants? So there are totally new set of challenges which we have ahead of us, totally different what it was before. And the way which we are going to go through it is we have a long-term and a short-term action on that. And the short-term action which we are taking now for the year is that we need to collaborate much better than we did in the past. So collaboration is going to be an issue.
Sustainability, no issue at all?
Sustainability is on the top also. We had like a major 3 actions which we had is the role of the E&C in the industry, is how are we able to improve the collaboration, and sustainability is the 3rd one. On sustainability, the issue which we have been discussing is, are we able, let's say, to redesign many of the things which we are using in this world in a different way that we used to do in the past? Rather than one through, in a way, a usage, can we, it's like the McDonald's, or I mean, can you reuse, and can you let's say, eliminate the waste in a better way and close the loop on these issues rather than one-time use as we used to do in the past? And I think also the E&C team has also a role to help the government in a way also to set some of the rules on carbon and carbon policies, because these are very important issues as we are moving forward. We do believe that the people in the private business are going to run a lot of these things, but we need to have a policy and a boundary which we can work, let's say, within. And the question is that, are we able to convince the governments on many of these issues, and in order to be able to implement this type of changes?
That's good. Gérard, energy, an exciting topic. Always has been, it's more so. What did you come up with? Lots of change, I assume, lots of good things happening.
Yes,
excite us about the future.
We had, among the Energy Summit, very interesting discussions about the consequences for our sector of the crisis, the turmoil, but also for the post-Copenhagen situation. And I would say that in the long run, we are confident. We are confident because there will be world GDP growth, and in order to have GDP growth, you need energy growth. Right. This is for the long term. For the short term, regarding the economic crisis, the consensus is that the worst is over, is now behind us. There are realistic expectations for growth in 2010, with emerging economies giving the pace for that. We have lots of uncertainties in our sectors, of course, the same as most of the sectors. E&C, for example, the level of the physical demand in energy, which has been dropping in 2009.
It's the first time since the 60s.
Yes, for electricity, it was the first time since the war.
Since the war, since the Second War.
The electricity has been growing since the war, and in Europe, everywhere in Europe, and for the first time.
Amazing.
It has declined last year. We also have assessed the impact on financing. It is different for oil and gas companies and utilities. For oil and gas companies, we can say that they have been almost unaffected. That's not the same for utilities, because there is a regulatory risk. The intervention of the states is growing, and we don't know exactly where. And therefore, the investment in the sector has been falling by 18% in 2009. It was primarily due to credit crunch, also a prudent reaction, but also because of the lack of clarity on carbon rules, on the carbon pricing and climate change future. Therefore, we have had very important discussions on the post-Copenhagen situation. And in that respect, there are two different views. We are separated in two blocks. Although there is an agreement that the best option today is to be pragmatic, to continue to go on, to insist on advocating the need for a global framework with local and regional specifics. But mainly after Copenhagen failure, for some of the representatives, we need a message that was not sent by Copenhagen, and this introduced lots of uncertainty, because we have to 2050, we are in 2010, and in the middle there is nothing. There is nothing. And therefore, this affects the regulated, established sectors, while preventing the massive investments which are needed in the energy sector. And also to transform this sector into a low-carbon economy. And therefore, we have not the right signals after Copenhagen. And we don't know what will be the governance of the climate change fight. No input on carbon price. No rules on renewables, except in Europe. No precise limits on greenhouse gases emissions. For the others, not the majority, the 2-degree consensus in itself a major achievement, unprecedented progress on a global stance with respect to climate change. It was the first time that 170 chiefs of state decided on an agreement on the final objective. But for politicians, 2020, it's a little bit long and not really committing.
I guess not only for politicians. My old professor has always said, in the long run, we're all dead. So, okay, let's move on. What came out of the chemicals group?
Yeah, partly the same topics as previous speakers mentioned. We discussed crisis, and we discussed short-term and the long-term, and the long-term sustainability is the most important topic. Short-term, last year, chemical industry dropped 10 to 15%, a little bit dependent on region in the world. Strong recovery second half year, mainly due to Asia. In Asia, mainly due to China. 2010 outlook, bumpy road. I mean, let's not have the view that it is a staircase up to heaven from here onwards. There's unemployment rate which is higher, financial circuit not yet fully up to standards, governments having issues with stimulus packages which are drying up, state debts high, etc. So we said carefulness on the outlook, although much better second half year than first half year, but there's all kinds of reasons to be careful. That is on the short term, what happened in 2009. If I look to the longer term, most important topic is sustainability, Copenhagen climate change. Disappointment that Copenhagen did not result into clear targets. Of course, everybody's disappointed, but the biggest problem is, I think, it creates for industry uncertainty. So industries does not like uncertainty for doing their investments. And that in itself is not good in the current economic climate where we need the investments. Now, what we said, the positive news is that it is the first time since the 60s environmental issues was not called climate change or sustainability, but since the 60s, this is on the agenda. And every time when there was a small economic crisis, it dropped a little bit like, hey, we have now other things to worry about, sustainability, environment comes after. This is the first crisis and the biggest crisis over the last 60 years in which sustainability increased as a topic and the attention during the crisis. In itself, that is very hopeful, I think, for the planet. 120 heads of state there. Okay, difficulty, not yet agreeing. But we said as an industry, the chemical industry could be an enabler. And that is a struggle we have, especially in the United States and Europe, where a lot of people see the chemical industry Is that not an old industry? No, it is an industry which is reinventing partly itself, making new products to make cars lighter, to do all kinds of things in biofuels, in solar cells, etc. So it is an enabler for climate change, where the politicians and the public, not in Asia, not in India, not in China, but especially in Europe and the United States, thinks, well, can we do without those kind of industries? Which I think is a concern, chemical industry, but also other industries, because we should not forget that at the same moment we say that maybe we could do without those industries, we say we want to go to a knowledge economy. And a knowledge economy is based on research and development.
And then we're in the UK.
And the manufacturing, exactly, because the manufacturing and research and development are many industries very strongly connected to each other. So that is an important thing to address. But I think sustainability, most likely in our industry, will be the biggest issue.
Very good. I now put my other hat on because as a member of the Metals and Minings team, let me report where the metals and minings industry came out, and you will hear similar themes here, and then we go back to the discussion. Metals and Mining's theme basically was metals and mining is crucially important for the growth in many countries around the world, and could be fostering the growth or inhibiting it, as we've seen in some regions. First thing. Second thing is, depending on where you are, whether you are resource rich or whether you need to import resources, governments, particularly in the developing world, are seeing a need of more competency in doing this right, because for them it can be a fundamental issue or a fundamental way out of their current situation. And they are calling on the industry, and basically, because we always invite heads of state to discuss it, well, they are calling on the industry and saying, look, we need your help, because very often we don't have enough of it, and even if we have stable business environments that we are able to provide, we still don't know exactly how to structure those type of deals so that in the end we can upgrade our economies and don't go into a colonial situation where it's basically only exploitation, right? So as a third point, and there was a lot of discussion around that, and as a third point is the point of sustainability. I mean, our industry, if you look at the full value chain, is responsible for roughly about 8% of the total carbon emission worldwide. So that's substantial. I assume other industries even have higher numbers that are, because we are the heavy industry, right? That's what the session is all about, right? So I guess it's not a coincidence that the sustainability aspect is coming on. So that said, the economic outlook, pretty much the same than what has said here. Thomas, you went into it as the first one in detail. I don't want to repeat that. So with that concludes the report from the governors. Now let's go back and talk about your views, because you all run large companies. We've sat on a panel last year, and I think we all feel better this year than substantially better this year than we felt last year. So let's start with a negative one, and then I go to a positive one. All that you see in your company, in your industry, and you look rather to the shorter term, not to the longer term, right? I'm talking about 2 years. Let's put the perspective in 2 years. What is the most worrying thing that you currently see? What concerns you? Just a quick one, just one go through, and then I take another round, and then we go for the most positive one, right? So can we just start here on that side with you? So,
well, by the way, you cannot disconnect completely the short term and the long term, because I think now
no, but I don't want to project out. We're all positive when it comes to the long term, but we have to survive the short term. That's more why I'm saying it.
Not true. Like I said, I think on the short term we saw a strong recovery. We need to realize that recovery to a large degree is linked to the growth in Asia, India, China, emerging economies, of which China maybe is the largest single factor. So yes, we are all recovering. Yes, that is to a large degree dependent on the huge growth in China. That is positive news, but it creates also a certain dependency of the industry, and that is very good to realize. Secondly,
so this is your biggest worrying point is China dependency on China?
Yeah, it's not a worry, because in itself it's very nice that China is growing.
But
so
if
fast.
you can, for the sake of having us all understand, because I assume every one of us has one point that we worry most about. If you were willing to share that one point with us so that we get a little bit of insight on what is really going on there, what could go wrong. What is it that could go wrong, right? Because I guess we all come out saying it's better, much better, we have a good chance, most likely going to pick up. It's a little cloudy, overcast, we might have some thunderstorms once in a while, you know, but it's not like we're going to get killed, right? So I assume that that's where you are from the description.
Yeah. You need to distinguish a couple of things. There are, of course, worries about the economy in general. It has nothing to do with the chemical industry, but if the economic climate will get a bumpy road and also some dips again in 2010, due to unemployment, due to capital reduction, due to the financial circuit, then also our industry, every industry is hurt. Secondly, the industry, like
you only got one. That's the most worrying one.
You don't speak too much.
I have to do it because they all want to hear it.
Turn it off.
Let's go to the next one. Gérard.
I would say that the most worrying point is the decorrelation between the gas price on the market and the oil price. For many years, gas price has been linked with the oil price, has been correlated, and in the long-term contract, gas is indexed on oil. And since last year, we've seen something really new on the market. You've seen the oil price recovering very strongly by 40–50%, and for the gas price on the market, free market, it was the contrary. The gas price dropped.
So why is that? Why is that your biggest concern?
Because we are in the gas business, and we buy most of our gas, which are at prices which are indexed on oil. Therefore, we pay our gas at higher price. And in the markets, in the free market, the gas prices are very, very low. Of course, we sell only a small part of our gas on the market. We sell to clients on long-term contracts too. Therefore, we are back to back. But nevertheless, that's a strange situation, and which introduce lack of clarity signaled by the market.
Okay, right. What's the percentage of your total portfolio that's dependent on gas?
We'd say 30%.
30%, okay. So, and
for me, I mean, it's delays and cancellation of major jobs. I mean, that's going to be a major issue, because if we don't get the orders, then we'll be having issues with our manpower, because we have been investing quite a lot in developing, let's say, the best teams in the world. And as we are doing so, now we are sitting there, and if we don't see the orders, then we need to cut down. And that will not be good, because then we have already cut down on the fat. We're now going to cut down on the flesh. And that's going to be a little bit difficult for us. So that's some of the challenges which we have.
Frank.
Yeah, very clearly the huge state deficits. So I'm really concerned. You know, we have not a clue altogether, I think, how we should manage that going forward. And, you know, if we get higher inflation, you know, what the impact of the economy will be. So that's really my biggest concern.
And that goes back to the point of Feike is saying, look, that could be the trigger event, or you're looking for a trigger event. What could be the trigger event there, right? And what's the most positive one, Frank? The one that really cheers you up, you know, when you have a real bad day and you say, hey, you know, this is what's really going to happen. What I want to happen.
So that's a good question. You know, I think what really happens is that, you know, we definitely will see a recovery of the globalization, and you know, that will lead to more wealth around the world, and that's a huge opportunity for the planet, I think. You know, that because that will drive. And you know, if we have
real, is that really real? Is that really what you think of?
Yes, I think you know this.
And you're optimistic on that.
I'm very optimistic that it will come back, because as long as you have difference in wealth, you know, there is arbitrage, and that will proceed, and you know, we will see a lot of growth in Asia. So I'm pretty optimistic.
What's the percentage of traffic that is up? I understand.
Yeah, you know, because you know, that's you know, we are in a quiet period, as all of us. You know, that's a difficult thing to talk about numbers. But overall, Asia has definitely started picking up, and we will see in the triangle. We see that there are three triangles. You know, intra-Asia, Asia to Latin America, Asia to Middle East, Africa, and they will grow quite heavily in the next coming years. because there's enormous increasing demand by consumers, which will lead to this increase.
Good. More people on the planet. More.
Yeah,
more,
Asia
more
will get
their
60% worldwide GDP share back, which they had 200 years ago. So that's not a surprise, I think.
Samir, what pumps you up?
I think we're seeing now a better harmonization between energy security, energy affordability, and energy sustainability, which we did not have in the past. And I think this is going to be giving us actually quite a lot of new opportunities which did not exist in the past. And by this, actually, I'm hoping now to go out and buy a number of companies, and we are on an M&A trail, and that's going to be exciting for us.
Gérard, I know you are an optimist. So what is it that, drives
a good
that?
news would be for us to see the energy efficiency becoming at the top priority in Russia, China, and India, because that's also our business. We've decided we sell gas and power, but also we have dedicated a full branch of activity with 77,000 people, fully dedicated to energy efficiency, and therefore this would represent a significant new market for us.
What is it today in your portfolio? You have it in your portfolio already, energy efficiency?
Yes.
Small.
We have 14 billion euro in this business, which is a service business.
Gee.
14 billion euro with 77,000 people. That's
fantastic.
I now dedicated to
why you're not
energy services and energy efficiency.
Okay, Feike, what pumps you up?
Improving the state of the world.
World peace.
No, because it's big words. I could have also said save the planet, but that's maybe too big. So improve the state of the world. I can justify that. I think when you look to our company, and if you look to our industry, we are really an enabler to a lot of global issues we are facing. 9 billion people, how we're going to feed those, how we're going to live together, how we're providing into alternative energies like wind and solar, etc., climate change, etc. So if you see this industry, it is highly involved in the major issues we have on the table as a society.
It's very good. Very, very good. Sustainability seems to be one of the common themes that we've been talking about, and seems to affect everybody, and actually also a point of optimism. As we just saw. I think that what came through is that Copenhagen was not what we all had hoped for, right? So, what, in your view, could be steps taken next, or how do we, solve this conundrum that seems to be there? Right. Any volunteers? Yeah, please, Frank.
I think it has increased the responsibility, for the industries or, large companies. And that's the reason why I'm pretty happy that the logistics and transportation industry has agreed already on standard how to measure and create transparency about carbon emission, because that's the first step to really reduce our carbon footprint. That is actually what the result of that is. We can now hope that the governments sit together soon and find an agreement. But until then, it's our responsibility to do something on that.
And please don't take it personally. Did you have in your governor's session, because you said that was an outcome also of the governor's session to agree to transparency standards, did you run that by any NGOs? Or was it just something that the industry dreamt up? No,
we did it, under the umbrella of the WEF. We have support from the WEF, and that was driven. That is also existent for the postal operators. I have always, two hats. One is in the postal world and one is in the logistics world. We have it as well under the top 20 postal operators. We agreed on targets even to reduce our footprint by measurements. So I think we are making good progress to set standards, because, that's the way, instead of competing on standard and measuring, we should compete on reducing the carbon footprint of our products. And I think we are heading in both industries, I think, in the right direction.
Is part of it, because I don't know it, is part of it that you kind of create a third balance sheet where you also show how CO2...
Somehow, yes. We already publish our footprint for our company quite a while. We will now ask, and it's partly already certified by our auditors, and I think we have to progress on that and really show that we are making progress. We have a clear target to reduce our footprint until 2012 by 10%, and until 2020 by 30%, which is already, 1.5 years old. And others in our industry are falling in that dimension now and direction, and I think that's very healthy. We should not wait. We are very influential somehow, not as influential maybe as lawmakers or politicians, but we have our responsibility as well, and I think we should stand up for that. And then somebody said that the good news is it didn't disappear. Well, it didn't disappear in the crisis, and that's a good sign, I think. All are talking still about that, because that would be the worst. Say, we have now a crisis and we can forget it for another 5 years until it's all over. I think many companies and many industries are still focusing on that. And I think that gives me some hope that if the governments can't agree on something, that we as industries, several industries, are moving faster and do something about that.
Any other comments?
I think if you take a look on the word consumption of energy, and let's make it very simplistic. So if you have 1/3 power generation, 1/3 industrial and residential, and 1/3 transportation, actually at the end of the day, we may have failed, let's say, to have a clear framework about what will be the carbon pricing and how are we able to decarbonize power generation and so on. But I think what was good about it is that we have increased the total awareness for the users and the customers of this world. And they are actually responsible for more maybe than 60-70%. And actually, if we are able to change the behavior of the users, they will be able to drive the market. Not the market will be driving them in a way, because they are the market. And this is a very interesting dynamic which we did not have in the past, which I think it is very exciting. And as you were speaking about also before, Frank, about we were speaking about measurement. Well, you cannot measure, you will never be improved. I mean, in our company, we started to think about this, and we started to think about how are we able to deliver our clients sustainable solutions to anything what they do, whether it is in oil and gas exploration or power generation or others. But it's important is that to take a look on, are we doing something about the water consumption? Can we improve the efficiency there? Can we reuse the water? Can we cut down on the energy bills? Can we make our customers to be even more profitable than they are today? So we're changing the concept of thinking rather than being very traditional and very, very, in a way, rigid. And it also goes even to our own, let's say, carbon footprint. I measure my carbon footprint. There's people which are auditing me even. So like in the third quarter of 2009, I had 14.2 tons carbon footprint, which is very high actually. The average American is about 10 maybe. So but I'm very much higher than that because of my traveling. And the fourth quarter was even higher than that. So, but if you are not able to measure, how are you able to improve?
Yeah, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. Feike, you wanted to comment on it?
Yeah, I'm in fact personally also thrilled, also as an industry, but also personally thrilled that sustainability is high on the agenda. Because I think it is a real important issue threatening us. And I'm also happy that it has the full attention of all the global leaders and most companies. We have set voluntary our own targets, like many companies in this panel and in the room also did. Great. Governments still need to make a next step. And it's very understandable, the debate in Copenhagen and the tension between economy and climate and innovation, because that was the debate, in fact. It was not only a climate change debate, it was an economic debate about economic growth. In fact, the classical prisoner's dilemma, where the people were sitting in that debate. But it has to be resolved. And it has to be resolved as a level playing field. Because Europe is taking the lead a little bit in the discussion in target setting. And Europe cannot set the targets in such a way that we are killing in the meantime, helping the planet, but killing our own industry in Europe. That is a little bit a dilemma and a concern. Two things to add to that. One thing was not highlighted very strongly in Copenhagen, and I think it's essential, and that is innovation. We discussed a lot of targets.
Very good point.
And what was not on the agenda is how do we reach the targets? We need to invest much more in innovation, new technologies, in order to reach the targets. And I think an over-representation of the discussion goes into target setting, and a very small part of the discussion goes in how do we reach those targets. Even stronger, if I say it a little bit sharper in this audience, I see that especially in China and the United States, a lot of effort is being done into innovation. There was some comments, of course, in Copenhagen that the United States and China did not want to commit to higher targets. Maybe true, but they commit themselves tremendously to innovation. The biggest windmill parks, the biggest solar cell parks being built in China at this very moment. And that is something to realize, because we have also in 10 or 15 years from now a discussion on target setting. And it is interesting to see what happened with innovation.
It brings me to another point. I mean, which drives, and will even more so in my view, drive the short-term debate in many governments' jobs. Right? As Samir, you said it. It was your biggest concern. You have people on board now, and you only have them on board because you believe the economy is coming back, right? And I think that's probably true for many of us, right? At the same time, I don't even want to go through the statistics of how many we have actually lost over the last 18 months, right? And what's your view? I mean, where do you see this coming out? I mean, in your own business, in your industry, is there, or in general, I mean, where could jobs come from? I mean, because that's going to be the next big political debate. Gérard, yeah, please. You are in an environment that's particularly interesting in that regard. Yes.
I will answer also on jobs, but let me say a few words on sustainability.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's clear that the energy sector feels responsible,
sure,
also for greenhouse gases emissions for a large part, and it has not been waiting for the results of Copenhagen or the non-results of Copenhagen for investing, moving, introducing also the green energy. Of course, we were hoping for clear guidelines, even constraints, because we have lots and lots of to invest in the energy, thousands and thousands of billions of euros. We do invest, but the investments are not optimized because of the lack of clarity. And we hope that in the next meeting in Mexico, those guidelines could be set up in order to give to the business the more precise constraints in order to make more investments. We do not ask for subsidies. We want stable policies.
Because you also have a lot of innovation and the efficiency part that you mentioned before, which is very encouraging.
Yes, and there are jobs also.
Right. Can you comment a little bit on the job side, as you particularly live in an environment where I think this debate is already very hot?
Yes, you know, in our company, we will have to hire during the coming 5 years 130,000 people, not new jobs, but because of the age pyramid and the rotation. But we are growing. Excuse me?
130,000, did you say that?
How many? 130,000.
130,000. I just want to confirm that I heard it right.
Yes, today we have 200,000 people. Therefore, that's also a challenge, the transformation of the company. More than half of the people who will be in the company in 5 years are not here today.
Wow. Is that indicative to everybody? This would give hope.
In the service business, and also in all what is linked with the green business, there is growth and new competencies that we need. Therefore, we need young people. We train them, and the need for energy efficiency is growing all over the world.
Super. Anybody else?
I think the logistics industry is already probably the largest employer around the world. That's not well known, because it's so fragmented that people and politicians usually don't recognize that. And I have no doubt that logistics industry will be a key driver for new employment as long as globalization is going on. And I said already that I'm convinced that this is taking place. So logistics will definitely create a lot of new jobs around the world.
Samir, you want to say?
I think for our company, when we were coming into the downturn in a way, we started to think about this, and we started to think about how can you able to capitalize on some bad news and convert them to some good wins here. Right. And then we were trying to look on that, and we said, well, why don't we do a forced ranking system? Now, you know that forced ranking system, but for your employees is not allowed in every country. And we are in 40 countries. But we
forced ranking for the employees.
For the employees, right. So we did the bell-shaped curve, So you have like 70, 80% average. You have 5 to 10% good, 5 to 10% maybe less good. And we started to think about it, and we said, well, wait a minute. is this not an opportunity actually for be able for us to change the qualification of our people, trim up our people, and actually motivate them and inspire them and lead them for a much bigger, let's say, projects in the future than what they are doing today. So the 2009 was a great year for us on that term. Because
so you used it. You
used it
did go there.
Because many of our peers in the industry, when they were like, let's say, telling people to go home, we started actually to check about who's leaving, who's coming here. And by doing so, we started, as we're making a better assessment of our people, went out, got the best people, because we had a little bit better revenues and better profit and a clear vision on what we are trying to do. So we were able to attract very good people to our company, which we would have never had that opportunity in a boom market. So, and that's the thing which we have changed, and I think it has been very good. But are you able to do that in every country which you are in? Definitely not. But we did it in many countries, and it has been very successful.
Feike, you want to say anything on jobs?
Yeah, maybe another angle to the job discussion is, are we in, especially Europe, if I may say that, because in Asia it is absolutely different, focusing enough on technical people, chemists, scientists, biologists, etc., which we need if we want to remain a knowledge-based industry, knowledge connected to R&D, R&D connected to manufacturing. And we need to have those people. And increasingly, I see it in our company also, we need to hire for positions in Europe, out of Asia, out of Eastern Europe, whatever, where we're also growing in those areas and hire from the local market, obviously. And that is a concern. Connected to the concern is the whole education topic. How do we look to change in those industries?
Before I open it up to the floor, I want to have one quick other topic here, which has not been addressed by anybody here, and frankly, it's surprising that it has not been addressed. Has not been addressed in the metals and minings, and same thing, it's the whole aspect of security, world security, right? And from what I'm hearing is, everybody kind of assumes this thing, as messy as it is, it's not going to be the big disruptive factor. I think in this regards, our view substantially deviates from the view that some politicians have, at least when you listen to them. Is that a correct observation, or are you saying, hey, it just didn't come up because that's a new norm, or any views on that? Anybody wants to
you told us that we only can mention one concern.
Yeah, no, sure.
So that's the reason why probably security didn't come up, but security is definitely a challenge. Because this is disruptive. If you remember the 9th of September or 11th of September. And that can happen again somehow, regardless of what you do, and that has massive impact on global trading and other aspects. So I think we have to do something on that jointly. This is not only a cost aspect, but also a real threat, security, how you manage that, and we need to find answers that we balance, the cost which is related to maximum security, and nevertheless deliver maximum security, which is possible. And as long as there are people who are crazy, you can't guarantee 100%, but we should get as close as possible. That has to happen at a reasonable price. Otherwise, we will kill the recovery of the economy. So that's a difficult, really difficult balance between the two goods, having growth on one end and maximum security on the other. But that's definitely a big concern for all industries at the end of the day.
Klaus, if I would like also to share with you about sometimes, when you go on road shows after you have been making announcement of results and you're meeting with shareholders, and they will be asking you if there is one reason or two reasons that you cannot have, or you have a sleepless night, what would be the reason actually? And really for our business, and I say, the worst thing which can happen to us is that like we are running a major platform, oil platform, for instance, gas platform, and the whole thing explodes for whatever reason. And then you will be able to, or you will be killing maybe 500-600 people at one time. That's a disaster. Yeah? So that's an issue which we really deal with. And therefore, Amec has been driving very much actually about the health and safety. And we have a program, what we call Beyond Zero, which is that means that we are going to have not only zero LTIs, lost time incidents, but you go beyond the zero, which means that in the communities which we are working on, we are giving education to children in order to do that. But let me come back to the safety and security issue. We do a lot of work for the U.S. government. And we have a strategic alliance with the U.S. Air Force and also with the Navy. And, these guys, they don't go to nice places. As much as we try to convince them that we would like to do like work in Guam but they don't agree with us. So we have been very much involved in Iraq. We have been there during the very tough periods. We almost have almost 2 security persons for each engineer. It was a major undertaking. And it was a very costly exercise. You know, you really have a sleepless nights because every day, you know, you wake up in the morning, and I'm very serious. The first thing which I do is I just read my BlackBerry. Did anything happen yesterday which has caused some major issue for us? And losing one guy is a major issue. And I have been living that. I used to work for a company in the past, and I still remember there was a terrorist attack and 5 people got killed. That was a major disaster. It was a major disruption for our business. I mean, the whole management team, 3 months were actually busy with this. So that's we do not want to repeat. But the problem is that, I mean, as we're moving now, let's say we'll be discussing like, I mean, some oil gas companies you have been hearing lately, they said, well, they're not maybe going to continue their activities in the oil sands in Canada because for environmental reasons. But Canada actually provided quite a lot of security. But now we're going to go to some new places, which are easy oil and easy gas, which is very different terrain than many normal people have been used to. We still act in Nigeria. We said that we are not going to be in the Delta because we don't want to be shot. So we move offshore in Nigeria, and what they do, they take the boats and they follow us up. So, I mean, so it's quite a difficult thing. So security is very important for our company because if you lose one guy, then you really lose the business, maybe.
I guess you all want to comment on it, but for the sake of time. Okay, Feike.
Well, it is a political question, and what a politician would do with the question is use one word out of it and then turn the question into another topic.
Yeah, you don't do that.
And I'm going to misuse this panel because it's an interesting thing. One security issue, in my personal opinion, and it is in this industry a very controversial statement, is that we have not regulated CO2 pricing. That is a free market. And what I do not hope, and what I'm a little bit afraid of, that you get derivatives of derivatives of derivatives of CO2 pricing, and that the same kind of things could happen as we have seen in the financial industry. And then it is happening in our industry at the expense not of speculation of financial products, but the expense of the environment. And I am advocating myself for a stricter regulator, and I know it's controversial, not everybody agrees with it. There's more to be said about that, but I am advocating for a certain kind of regulation of CO2 pricing to a certain level of stability. I know that not everybody agrees, but I hope that I'm wrong, that it could create problems in 5 or 6 years from now.
I have the impression that most of the heavy industry folks would sign up on something that goes along the line of saying it's a global problem, so make sure that there's also kind of a global solution so that we don't have local differences and then we have to cope with all of that. I think you said it, Gérard, in your industry is crucial, and I guess that's really true for all of us. But let me conclude on the security one. I'm glad I asked because, in a way, it didn't come up before, but from your description now, and I would totally concur with that, it has become an ugly new norm, right? An ugly new norm. That's a nuisance. That's a cost factor, right? And unfortunately, it seems almost like we're giving up a little bit on hope that this will go away very quickly. That's at least my hypothesis. We have a couple of minutes and time for some questions here. There's a microphone over there. There's a question over here.
Yes, my name is Omura. I come from Japan Bank for International Cooperation. So my question should be addressed to Mr. Mestrallet, because one of the main objectives of our bank is to encourage private financial institutions to put money in long-term projects like energy sector. And in the past year, because of crisis, the money decreased. So my question is, besides the outcome of Copenhagen, do you have any concern about long-term financing because of revision of supervision over financial sector? Concerning liquidity versus capital, because long-term financing cannot be considered as liquid enough.
Well, it's true that essentially after the Lehman Brothers collapse, all the financial markets have been stopped. the equity market, the bond market, the banks have stopped doing their job. In fact, GDF SUEZ was the first company in Occident after Lehman Brothers to be able to tap the bond market. Mm-hmm. And what we have seen afterwards is that the bond market represents a real source of long-term financing for companies. In the oil and gas, have no problem, oil and gas companies, but for the utilities, the bond market has represented really a significant source of long-term funding at long-term and good conditions. The banking sector, on the contrary, has more or less stopped financing the projects. And therefore, we've seen real difficulties for the project financing for big projects. We had a big one just after our merger with Gaz de France and before the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and we had to we were the preferred bidder, and we had to find the finance for that. And where usually we had 4 big banks to do that, we needed 50 banks in order to raise the same amounts of financing that usually had necessitated only 4 or 5 big banks. Therefore, we consider that today the banking part of the financing for the project finance for the big projects is not there again.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Please.
Mark Spellman, Accenture. I'd be very interested to know what your top 3 strategies are for handling greater uncertainty and volatility over the next 3 years.
Anybody wants to take it?
Maybe I should take this. I just presented to the market on December 4, I call it Vision 2015. And in Vision 2015, I said there will be 4 major elements which are going to be used in order to be able to answer the question which we have. One is that how are we able to invest further in our people? In qualification, it's number 1 because we are people business. We are only engineers. What we provide is engineering services to our clients. And how are we able to equip them with the latest state-of-the-art, let's say in terms of tools and processes? So that's number 1. 2 is enhancement in capabilities. And I said the market actually has been bad for many of the companies, and this creates opportunities for companies who has been solid or running their balance sheet in a good way. So actually, this is an opportunity to do a number of acquisitions which you could not do in the past. There is a number of geographies which are also very interesting, I think, for every business of us. As much as global as we are, as the business changing very fast, we are seeing new opportunities in new geographies which we did not see in the past. Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to be very interesting. Like who thought about Brazil, for instance, is going to be a major oil and gas company in the sense about what it is today? And who thought that Turkmenistan is going to be on the scheme? And all that is actually in changing the whole geography in a way for us and our presence. And the 4th one, which is very important, is how are we able to use more efficiently our balance sheet than we did in the past? I think, and as you know, in the past, let's say maybe if you have been over-leveraged, I mean, that was okay, but a certain period of time, that was not sexy at all to be over-leveraged. But actually, to have too much cash on your balance sheet is also not that great neither. So I think there is some certain fine balance there, and for every company is a little bit different. But I encourage everybody, especially the big companies like GDF SUEZ and so on, is actually to consider about what is the best timing for making an investment. And I say, well, this is the best time. When should we do that otherwise? So these are the 4 elements of the Vision 2015, which we presented to the market, to be able to ensure the growth which we are looking for.
So you're also seeing that as opportunity time because some assets are available. I think you said that early on. I mean, some assets have become available, so go after them. You said it on the human resource side. Yeah. Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. See the opportunity in the crisis. Any other questions? Please.
I'm an academic. I teach at a business school, but I'm also trained as an engineer. So I have a quick
That's
question.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I
actually,
apologize.
According to Edelman's trust analysis,
yes,
you have the highest trust factor, so we're happy to have you here.
So far, we haven't been blamed for the financial market meltdown, but I'm afraid one day that'll happen. So I have two questions, if you don't mind. The first is your industry obviously needs lots of engineers, scientists, designers, and so on. So do you see that you have enough availability? I know you mentioned in some places that you've been opportunistically hiring, but that's because others are laying off. And you had mentioned that you were hiring from Asia and Eastern Europe and so on. But we have this phenomenon, at least in the United States, that we don't have enough people enrolling in science and technology and engineering subjects. And when we ask them why is the case, they say, well, there are no jobs and nobody pays us enough. And so my question is, will there be a time when you won't have enough engineers and scientists and designers? And then would you have to resort to banker-type bonuses in order to hire them? I have a son who's training to be an engineer, so he's hoping that he's going to get banker bonuses. I'm telling him not to hold his breath.
Right.
So that's kind of one question. The second question was, should we just keep on waiting for governments to get their act together and come up with a treaty of some sort, whether it was Copenhagen or any other location, or should the industries kind of get together and decide that we just need to move on ahead? And if so, other than the logistics and transportation business, are some of you also thinking of doing something like that?
Thank you. Anybody wants to take the first question?
I mean, I take the first question. Maybe you would like to take the second. It's up to you.
I answer the second. And this gentleman just said, we are doing already versus an industry. It was more a question for the other three.
But the first question on, I'm just actually coming from a panel on the nuclear side, and I just was actually enhancing about how important this was the skills and talents, because we don't have enough skills and talents in order to be able to deal with the challenge on nuclear. Because if we are really serious about this, and we are going to build 22 nuclear power plants on an average basis per year, and today we are suffering with one, and in Finland and other places also. But the biggest market at the moment is actually in China. We said that there's 12,000 megawatt being initiated, real construction initiated in China. 12,000 in the world, 11 locations. There are 9 of them in China, 1 in Russia and 1 in Korea. But what we're seeing is that there is a big constraint actually on nuclear engineers, also on oil and gas industry, and also on the new technologies, like what I said, renewable energy. Even what I call today is the basic energy, like wind power, we have actually shortage of people. So there is an enormous shortage of people, and that's because we have messed up a little bit about that engineering profession is actually not a bad profession. And therefore, in the ANC government meeting, we have come to the conclusion that we are fed up that we are underpaid. So we said, why is a banker who is like 30 years old can make like 5 or 6 times more money than the engineer? This is so crazy. It's stupid. And how many engineers which actually...
Did you change it? Did you bring them up?
No, we gave salary increase to our people this year too. But we need to do more than that.
That's a cheap answer. Come on.
No, but actually there is an issue, because we need to think about this, because at the end of the day, if we need to deal with the challenges, especially on energy sustainability, security, and affordability, we need to think about the equation better than what it is today.
I think he has a point.
We need to engage with government and academia and industry together in order to be able to define what the need is and how we're able to do it. And I think we have been failing as academia here to be able to develop the right number of engineers.
And I think there are large regional differences also. I think, Feike, you responded to that. You were pointing to the U.S., and as a U.S. citizen, that is an issue. That is a big issue. And I think you're also pointing to two things. One, how few people get attracted by it, and that some that potentially would get attracted by it, maybe the smarter ones, get turned off by saying, now, then where would I find a job if I wanted to stay in the U.S.? Because all I'm hearing is this expansion over here, expansion over there, and closures of plants in my country. I think it is a serious point. And then also, in my view, the whole immigration policy plays into it, which you know very well. Second, on the second question, Frank, you want to?
Yeah, I think you said already that we are doing something in logistics and transportation to standardize and have a basic concept that companies can follow. So I can only reconfirm what I already said. I think it's important that industries are taking the lead. We should not wait until the politicians come back again. I think that's very important. That's our joint responsibility.
Feike, you want to comment on that?
I find both questions, by the way, very, very valid. And you can ask yourself whether you had 2 questions or 2 statements. And if you had two statements, I agree with both. In Copenhagen, industry was very invisible, and your question is, should now in the run to Mexico, or if I hear already some people, well, Mexico, let's discuss Cape Town, the COP17. And if I heard during the forum already discussing about COP17, then you can ask very valid the question, is there not also a role for industry to take a little bit stronger the lead? And that is what you were pleading for. Your first question is also, I think, very, very relevant. And I make again the plead, knowledge industry is related to R&D, is related to manufacturing. We cannot only have services. By the way, a lot of our Western services industries in Europe, in the United States, at the end of the day, is linked also to the manufacturing industry. Absolutely. And we should not forget that service industry where some governments are so happy with, let's focus on services. Right. Well, without the manufacturing industry, you will lose a part of that services also.
That's very good, and with that, I mean, let's wrap it up. I think one of the things on that sustainability that came out here is that every one of us was positive, brought it up as an issue among the governors group of the heavy industry. Right? Keep in mind, this is the heavy industry that sits here. Those that probably 5 years ago you would have least thought that have that on their agenda, they probably wouldn't even have brought it up, and they would have probably praised that Copenhagen didn't lead to anything. You saw exactly the contrary, and I think it's happening. So I give a lot of credit to everybody, not only on the panel, but everybody who's in this governor groups, was basically a good representation. Thank you all. I would summarize the optimism. It's much better weather outside, and we're going to have some overcast, but mostly sunny though, and some spots of bright sunshine going forward that we all gravitate towards, and once in a while a little thunderstorm, but that's not going to hit us. And I hope that when we come back here in a year from now, that the positive things will have even been stronger, and all the worries we would have said we have managed through that and have gone through it very well. Thank you all to the panelists. Thank you all to you coming. Thank you very much.